I appreciate you guys joining us. How are you, Keith?
I'm doing great, Pat. How about yourself?
Doing good, man. I think we have a really important topic today.
Absolutely.
So the role of detection and response in the era of assumed breach. So Keith, assumed breach, what do we mean by that?
Well, assumed breach in the zero trust framework that we're looking at, we're assuming that breaches are going to happen and that there's going to be attackers in your network. And we are preparing for that by doing everything necessary to make sure that we are detecting these things in our environment and responding proactively.
And detection and response is really important. So let's jump into kind of our approach today. All right, so first off, as always, we go into what's the current challenge and opportunity. As a business leader, why is this important? We've got so many things demanding our time. And we're going to move across this fairly quickly. Our idea, I love the John Wooden quote, be quick, don't hurry. Our audience here is executives of small, medium businesses, typically 300 users and below. So there's a different type of security approach, normally some different budget constraints and different types of resources that are in place there. And that's why I feel like these are really powerful if you're a business leader in that space. And then we're going to touch on the idea of modern security and what that means. And Keith's going to walk us through extended detection and response and how that comes in, plays a really critical role. And then beyond just extended detection and response is a 7x24 SOC, Security Operations Center, service with eyes on glass, human threat analysts appropriate for your organization. And what would the benefits of that be? And then, as always, wrap up with some good next steps. So, where we find ourselves today is that we've all made the pivot. We're about a year into COVID work from home. For some, it was very easy. Some, it was a little bit more of a challenge, and some still have areas that they're looking at. One thing was clear for most people: we were focused on productivity and really helping our people and our clients succeed. And sometimes security got a little bit of a back seat there because of the speed that change happened at. So now is a really important time to look at: are we compliant? Are we secure? And how can we have the appropriate security posture today and keep it really cost effective? And what you'll find with us, IT Productivity is a leading Microsoft partner, very focused on the Microsoft stack, and we believe that it represents a unique value for small, medium businesses because it's a per user, per month license fee that can bring enterprise technology into your organization for a few dollars per user per month. And a large portion of our client base is nonprofits, and Microsoft has a fantastic nonprofit program that can discount that even further. So depending on, I'd ask you to kind of look and just find yourself here. Like, do you feel like you're fully secure? Have all the security things caught up with any changes you've went through? How productive is your team at this point? Is there anything that needs to change? It's already top of mind for you. And then we're going to focus in on the security aspects of that now. This is a report we've touched on before. The reason I put it here is I wanted to emphasize the impact. What this shows is the first half of 2020 and the second half look very similar, that the quantity of threats and exploits happening in the small, medium business space is up, and that the cost and consequences of those breaches is also higher. Keith, this is our approach. Like we align clients around the true cost of IT. If you're a customer of ours, you're certainly familiar with it. The idea is that we make informed investment decisions based off a technology alignment process that understands our business priorities. It understands any kind of compliancy requirements and resource constraints that we have. And that from that, we make that investment level decision. And it's the triple constraints of this triangle, right? Based on the investment decisions we make, we get high or low productivity. We get good results or bad. And we get a high or low risk posture. And more importantly, maybe we get a known or unknown risk posture, making sure that we really just understand where we are in that process. Anything else on technology alignment, just to set the stage about how we look at IT and that you think's important there, Keith?
Not really. I think you really nailed it. The true cost of IT, that triangle, and the technology alignment process are really well intertwined. And if we're doing the technology alignment process properly, engaging with our clients properly, then that is going to increase productivity, lower risk, and lower costs at the same time.
Because what happens is when we go through that alignment process, we can help make good business decisions from a known posture for your organization. And then things that aren't handled now, they're put out on the roadmap, and you have a visual, you have a steering document where we know why we're making certain investments now and why others are being deferred, but they don't get lost. They're continually out there in front of us. And then we have that quarterly strategy alignment rhythm where we're coming back, meeting with the business execs, looking at it and making sure that we're in an appropriate posture. So with that, Keith, talk to us a little bit about modern security.
Yeah, the old way we used to think about security was that everything was kind of in a silo, right? You had your office, you had a perimeter around the office, all of your applications were running from there, your users were coming in and accessing your applications. Now that perimeter has pretty much been blown up, right? It's still there, still needs to be secured, but you have users all over the place now. They might be working from home, they might be working from anywhere, they might not even be working from this country. So we need to evolve with the tools that we're using to detect and mitigate threats.
And really partly is that the old way, a lot of times we were relying more on on-premise security infrastructure, whether that be your firewall, your Active Directory server for Microsoft. And the pivot that's occurred is that those same things are still important if you have on-prem equipment, but at a higher level, it's really important that we have a cloud-enabled security and authentication model that can support both on-prem and cloud, native or hybrid kind of environments. And for our customers, that means moving to Azure Active Directory and investing into that Microsoft security stack, like MDM and MAM, mobile app and mobile device management, and things that can start to secure your users, your resources from anywhere. And that brings us really to what we'll be touching on today, which is the detect and respond portion of the NIST CSF. So part of technology alignment is we use known frameworks, such as the NIST CSF, which is really an important one. And NIST CSF kind of, it organizes all of these security technical conversations in these major categories that are easier for business people to relate to. Identifying all your assets, protecting them, detect, respond, and recover. So in today, we're really going to touch on detect and that first part of response. And then another framework that we use and continually look at, the lens we're looking through, the mindset we have when securing clients is that of zero trust. And of course, last month we did, this presentation was focused on zero trust. So that is available and recorded if you like. But what you'll find with what we're talking about today with detection and response is it touches on all aspects of zero trust. It can help us identify issues in any one of these major categories. And 3 core tenets of zero trust. You want to explain these quickly, Keith?
Absolutely. So when we talk about verify explicitly, that means we're verifying everything. We're not just verifying the user's identity, we're verifying the user's device, we're verifying that that device is compliant with the security standards we have in place. The use of least privileged access, very important, always follow the, sorry, I'm blanking on the name, but we don't want to give administrators rights, or we don't want to give users rights that they don't need, right? So you want to elevate permissions when necessary, remove those permissions when they're no longer needed. And finally, like we touched on at the beginning, always assume breach. Assume that attackers are in your network, that they're looking around, that they're trying to find something and have something there to catch those bad guys and mitigate that threat before you're paying the price for it.
So let's take a look at extended detection and response and how it helps to address those issues that we're touching on. And specifically, we're taking a Microsoft approach to extended detection and response. And this graphic really captures why I think that's important. The majority of our clients are hosted on Microsoft 365 for some aspect of their business already. One of the challenges in some of what we're talking about is that enterprises have had a deeper threat analysis and response and SIMs and security operation teams for years, right? The challenge is, as a small business leader, how do we afford that? And the Microsoft stack allows us to move into those capabilities on a per user per month cost. So as an example, if you're a commercial user, Microsoft Business Premium, which gives you a lot of these security capabilities, is $20 per user per month and includes all your Microsoft licensing for that user up to 5 devices. And what we're talking about here today would add an additional license for Microsoft Endpoint Protection and Microsoft Defender Endpoint Protection and Microsoft Defender for servers. And the per user pricing or per server pricing there is $550 per user or per server. So, that's a monthly reoccur. So you can see that, relatively speaking, that's a fairly low cost for the extended security benefit that you're getting, compared to an enterprise tool that would have been deployed, could have easily been, $100,000 or more to put that in, and then, $100,000 or more in staffing costs to have the talent to know how to, to look at it and manage that properly. So another cost in security is just the complexity of these tools. So as all this integrates in the Microsoft platform and we continue to extend it, that complexity is much lower. It's getting all the signals from the other things we're doing with Microsoft, which further drives costs down. And I should touch from a pricing model. Nonprofit pricing is lower than that. I think Microsoft Business Premium for nonprofit is $8 per user. I think the first 15. Okay, and
the first 10 users are free.
Yeah, and then the Microsoft Defender pricing is a little bit less too. So the additive costs we're talking about today are really low, considering the security benefit that's going to come from that. Anything else on this slide you want to touch on, Keith?
No, you got it. I mean, the main point here is that we're integrating everything that's going to really tighten up security and give us the best overall view of the entire environment and reduce costs. Because when we're talking about an XDR solution, one of the main purposes of that is to integrate all of these advanced security tools into one tool. So in the past, you would have to invest in multiple solutions. We're combining all of that, which is going to bring a lot greater value.
And candidly, for our managed clients, we're moving them from a great endpoint protection product already, Sentinel 1, not to be confused with Microsoft Sentinel that we'll talk about next, because they're different products. And the reason we're doing that is because it's built into the Microsoft stack, and it starts to activate the Microsoft SIM that we're also going to touch on. So we're taking you from a good product to an even better, more integrated solution that's going to carry us forward and give us a much easier way to manage all that information and make sure we're making the most informed decisions as quickly as possible to mitigate risk.
Yeah, that's a great point, Pat.
So, this one was included to really show Microsoft's posture. I mean, this is March 2020. Forrester's obviously a major thought leader in our space that evaluates all these technologies. And, they rated Microsoft as the highest score in this area we're talking about. So we're not just going there for ease. We're not just going there for cost effectiveness. Microsoft is a major leader in cybersecurity now. Has really been there for years, but we just see more and more recognition of that. And just over the last 12 months, their cybersecurity business alone just crossed 10 billion. So it's a substantial business. So Keith, let's get into extended detection response. And guys, this is meant to be executive level, so we're not going to get really in the weeds, just kind of understanding where does this come to play, how can it protect your organization and your users, regardless of where we're working.
Yeah, so Gartner defines XDR, or extended detection and response, as SaaS-based security threat detection and incident response tool that natively integrates multiple security products into a cohesive security operations. So what does that mean? We're talking about SaaS-based, we're talking about cloud. There's no on-premise installation. There's not even an agent installation involved with the Microsoft Defender solution, which is great. And like we've been discussing, it integrates natively with that whole Microsoft stack. Primary advantages are you're going to get better protection and detection and response. Really important, which we're going to talk about in a minute. Improved productivity of operational security personnel, which means that the people that you have keeping eyes on this for you, they're going to get things resolved quicker, which is less risk to you. And that means that they're free to look into more threats that might possibly be there and mitigating those. And like we said, a lower total cost of ownership because we're integrating all of these tools into one solution stack.
Go ahead.
I was just going to finish up with that last bullet point that this is going to protect not just your cloud environment, but all of your environments, your cloud environment, your devices, your on-premise infrastructure at your office, even other cloud solutions. If you have servers in AWS, Microsoft could protect that even with this solution.
So what we're talking about here is kind of the modern version of what AV used to be. It's just AV plus, right? And it's on every endpoint that's being protected. It's on every server. It's on your notebooks, wherever they are, desktops in the office, remote machines. It's on cloud servers, whether it's an Amazon web server, an Azure web server. And then all of that telemetry, this is where the extended part comes in. All those signals, all that security input is coming back into a Microsoft SIEM that's looking at that and aggregating that and seeing trends and things that humans might not quickly see. And also has some playbooks and other things that tie in that can automatically help us secure across the organization. Whereas if you were only looking at endpoint management on any one machine, you may not see some trends. It might not be malicious by itself, but as you start to look at the aggregate of what's going on in the environment, you start to see suspicious activity. And then it can take action on that. And that's really where we can start to detect things before bad behavior has occurred. So touch on the endpoint portion of that, Keith, and what's going on there, and anything new that we might want to be aware of.
Yeah, so Microsoft Defender for Endpoint or Microsoft Defender for Server, which is basically the same thing for your Windows servers. It's a replacement for your traditional antivirus where you were looking at virus definitions and removing viruses from computers as they got there. In this day and age, that sometimes doesn't work. If you have ransomware that's encrypted all of your files, having an antivirus program to remove that isn't going to be very helpful because all of your files are still going to be encrypted. With Microsoft Endpoint Defender, you get near real-time detection and actionable response. And as Pat touched on, it's not just looking for virus definitions, it's looking for suspicious activity. You want to find that malicious activity in your environment and snuff it out before it has a chance to actually do any real damage to you.
I like this slide because it starts to help you visualize how it's protecting, Microsoft 365 Defender is protecting those endpoint devices. Azure Sentinel is taking all this information from devices, cloud apps, even your Microsoft 365 tenant and all your users and what's going on there. Other clouds, the Azure cloud, and even on-prem infrastructure, whether it's in your office or you have it hosted in data center. And all of that information comes into Sentinel, which is visualized there in the middle. And it can allow us to see and act upon those patterns. And then ultimately Azure Defender. Anything else on how they kind of connect together, Keith?
No, but I would like to point out that when we're talking about devices or endpoints with Microsoft Defender, it can cover not just your Windows PCs, not just your Mac computers people might bring in. It's protecting your iPhones, your iPads, your Android devices, and that's where a lot of other endpoint protection solutions fall short. They're not looking at every type of device that might be connecting.
And the licensing for that is still, one license is going to protect up to 5 endpoints per user. And we find most users don't really have more than 5 endpoints.
That's right.
In that technical, couple of you techie guys I know. Yeah. So let's look at Sentinel and help us understand its role there a little bit more, Keith.
So Azure Sentinel is what's known as a SIEM, or a Security Incident and Event Management Solution. And what that does is all of your logs from all of your different applications, your servers, your devices, you want to write those all into one repository where you can analyze those, look for these anomalies, and act on them. So Azure Sentinel is the first SIEM built into a major cloud platform, delivering intelligent security analytics. And as Pat mentioned, that telemetry, all of that data that is coming into Microsoft, they're taking everything and they're analyzing it, and they're constantly improving how they're looking at things in real time. And if you think about Microsoft, they have a lot of users, so they're getting a lot of good data. What Azure Sentinel can do is ingest those logs, look for these anomalies, and create incidents based on alerts in real time, and then give you a way to act against them. And what I love about going into this Microsoft stack for security is that Azure Sentinel will actually ingest all of that internal security information at no additional charge. You can put, your local firewall or other on-prem devices, send that to Sentinel. There would be a charge for that, but your 365 logs, your Azure Active Directory logs, all of your devices that are licensed with Microsoft Defender for endpoints, all going to go into Azure, create those alerts, help you detect and respond at no additional cost.
That's a good point, because the SIEM, the traditional SIEM model, that's an expensive investment. It's an enterprise class tool. It requires specialists that really know how to manage and interpret that data well. So for all your native Microsoft, as you license up, the Microsoft Sentinel product is provided at no additional cost at all. There's no Azure hosting costs or anything else. But if we choose to ingest data from your firewall, as Keith was saying, or non-Microsoft products, which may be important in your environment, there's some incremental costs that come in based off usage, bandwidth, and data storage, and that would be billed on a monthly basis, right?
That's right.
So Keith, think about current events. We ended the year with the big SolarWinds hack, where we found that the hack had actually happened back in March and went undiscovered by numerous federal agencies and some of the largest, most secure enterprises in the world, and was discovered by a client, one of these enterprise customers, in December, months after it occurred. So the challenge was that it was deployed through a tool that was trusted by all those environments because they had figured out how to hack the tool, right? So just last month, we saw SonicWall announce that they had a bug that had been exploited on one of their security appliances, and that's very relevant to a large portion of our small clients. SonicWall is a trusted partner with great product that's appropriate for most of our customers. Nobody's immune to this, and that's why this conversation about detection and response is so important. It's back to assume breach, whether it's because of an exploit that can happen at a platform level or a human error, or regardless of how it got triggered, breaches will occur. And the mentality I want you to have as a leader is that you're breached now. Are we investing into technology and talent to look inside our environment to find it and mitigate it as quickly as possible? And later in the presentation, we have a hacker timeline. And it really shows that typically they get in and they do recon to figure out how to do maximum damage. And they're there for a period of time. So if we can catch this ahead of time, they may get in, but may not compromise any of your data, may not create an incident that impacts your business, right? Is really the goal. And then you look at 2 weeks ago in Florida, we had a water treatment plant that got hacked. And my understanding of early on from just the open news is all I've seen on that so far, is that one of the employees was there. It was like 8 o'clock in the morning, and they could see mouse key movements on the screen, and they saw the adjustment get made. So that's eyes on glass. That's what we're going to touch on with 7x24. But this happened to happen on Friday at 8 a.m. So I don't know what their coverage looks like on Saturday at 9 p.m. or at 11 p.m. or 4 a.m. But traditionally, a lot of this happens off hours when there's less people looking or seeing that, and that's another important component that we're touching on here. This is really an overview that shows all the different areas that both Microsoft Defender and Azure Defender are covering. things that we've already touched on, but over here on the left-hand side with Microsoft Defender, you're seeing those same categories from Zero Trust, right? Making sure that all those areas are being covered. And on the Defender side, you're really seeing all the server side, whether it's on-prem or in the cloud, being protected. Keith, you want to talk about how when all this gets ingested, it's not just giving us as the security team better information that's aggregated so we can see trends. It's also using machine learning and AI to spot patterns and auto apply fixes and best practices.
That's right, and Microsoft is ingesting this information from all over the place, not just what they're seeing coming in. If you look there, they have a section called partners. They actually are partnered with third parties that, make some of the biggest firewalls and anti-malware solutions. They're getting data from them as well, and they're improving those analytics all of the time. They're keeping a list of known bad actors, building that list all the time.
So when this investment's in place in my small business, all of that intelligence that they're ingesting and all the logic and machine learning is being applied to my environment pretty much in real time. And
that's right.
Microsoft's now ingesting more security signals than any other organization in the world, which arguably means if they have more data and they're using it well and their AI is good, they're going to ultimately be in the know, potentially in a better position than anybody else. And certainly with our customers and with the alignment of technology with Microsoft, that's true, right?
That's right.
So this touches on a different nuance. Now we're talking about with that machine learning and AI and seeing that posture, the Microsoft stack can do some automatic orchestration and really stop a breach or a potential risk ahead of time, even before one of our people has been able to get involved, depending on settings and choices that we put in place. Anything there you want to touch on?
No, that's 100% right. You can build playbooks to automate some of this response. There are pre-built playbooks that you can adapt, but yeah, it's all about responding as quickly as possible and automating that response when possible.
So as much as we like the Microsoft product, now we're touching on the next step. So 7x24 SOC and MDR, this is Security Operations Center and managed detection and response, but this is at a human level. So depending on your risk tolerance and your investment strategy related to security, the next step would be to have 7x24 threat analysts at the home looking at that data all the time and escalating to our team if there's an event that's found off hours. Go into that a little bit, Keith, and with the confidence in Microsoft, we don't have an unlimited budget for security. So, and unfortunately, I can't tell you that you only need to do one. It's really about what would the consequences be of a breach for your organization? What are the potential risks? And whether they're both something that you can budget for now, because I think what we find is that this is a continually evolving threat. And what seems like a really high security posture today is kind of table stakes tomorrow. It's not enough anymore. It's just adequate. So I think that 7x24 SOC and MDR is certainly moving into the small medium business space. Again, it is broken down to a per user, per device price point per month. So it's not a huge upfront investment, but it is incremental. I can't price it here because it's based on some variables on your overall size and some different aspects of the components that are in there. But we can easily give you a quote directly if you're interested. Let us know. But touch on that a little bit and why even with all the advanced Microsoft security that we're asking you to invest in, this is that next level that may also be appropriate now.
So it's all about that concept of defense in depth, right? So you're looking at where you have gaps in security and how you can address those. You put Microsoft XDR solution in place, you're getting that great tight integration, you're getting that those analytics, you're getting the alerts, the ability to respond. But if you don't have a 7x24 staff looking at that stuff, even if you don't have dedicated security staff, there's some risk there to you. With 7x24 SOC MDR, you have a dedicated team of people that are doing this full time. They're keeping eyes on that, and they can respond almost immediately. They could contact us to have us respond, or we could even give them the go-ahead ahead of time to mitigate the most severe threats they see immediately without getting permission from us and then calling us up and reporting it. So I don't think it's a gap. It's not addressing a gap in the solution. It's about staffing and resources.
Yeah, and when you have threat analysts, specialists, and they have one singular role, that's what they're looking for. And I had a meeting with Will, who's in charge of threat intelligence at our SOC last week, and he was talking about how activities that Microsoft tools aren't naturally going to find because they're using PowerShell or they're using Microsoft tools that we use to administer the environment. So these aren't malicious tools in and of themselves, but in the SOC environment, they're looking at that from a managed MDR perspective. And if something is happening that doesn't normally happen in your environment, and it looks suspicious, they can look at that suspicious activity and flag it. They can follow it, and then they can quickly contain it if they start to see lateral spread and some of these other things that go on. And that's 24/7. We're emphasizing off hours because that's when a lot of the bad actors happen, because eyes on or down. This emphasizes that, but it's 24/7 is also during the business day. They're looking at activities that may go by unbeknownst because it's not going to trigger an alert in any of those tools that we've already put in place based off suspicious activity. And that could be a really big additional safeguard. So we touched on this up front, the hacker's timeline. I mean, really, Keith, it's about how sophisticated these hackers have gotten. We saw this with SolarWinds, and we see it in small, medium businesses all the time. We did some tabletop exercises a while back in looking at a law firm that was about 70 people, and they had been breached. And then the hackers had actually changed their backup jobs. They changed it so they'd still come back with good alerts, but it wasn't like the backup jobs were successful, but they had changed the retention window in a way that wasn't noticed. And then they did not trigger the ransomware until after the retention had fallen off at the back end. At that point, they did not have backups. So that is just crazy to think about, that level of discipline, right? They're not just reaching in and grabbing that one marshmallow, man. They're waiting to get the second marshmallow that you get when you're willing to wait, right?
That's right.
So this is common practice, and it's scary because, again, there's lots of different ways that things can be breached, and certainly we have processes wrapped around backups, and we've never seen it happen in our client base. I've never seen it directly in my career other than in these examples that come up that we look at. But that's not to say that they couldn't occur. So assuming they could occur, we're constantly changing our policies and procedures and our frequency of looking at and evaluating the backups at a configuration level, not just the alerts that are coming in. And that's where, we're on detection and response, but recovery is that last stage in the NIST CSF. And making sure that we've got a recovery capability is really important. And detection and response can be a really important component to protect recovery, right? Depending on the breach and what the bad actors are doing behind the scenes, we've seen that they've went in and taken that capability out. Anything else here you want to touch upon?
I do think this timeline is really interesting and really telling. Like you said, these threats are getting more advanced. And if you look at the very first step here, planning, there's a lot of thought and research going into this. These people aren't just coming in willy-nilly. Then when they come in, there's actually 3 different phases that they're taking. And this MDR is looking to identify any of those 3 phases, which all take place before any damage actually occurs. That first one is intrusion, the way that they're trying to get in. We can try to stop them there. If they do get in, they're going to start looking around saying, okay, what user am I? What rights do I have? What can I do? We want to try to get them there. And then finally, before they do perform their final attack, they start spreading laterally, right? They try to expand across different devices on the network. Those are all phases where we can stop them before they get to their objective, deploying ransomware, destroying the network, stealing, IP. And if you look at the end of this timeline, they're almost at 90+ days that this attack started before they're actually taking something. So that's a lot of time for an attacker to be in your network, and also a lot of time for you to be able to grab them and kick them out and make the changes you need to secure your environment.
And these are averages. That's not to say there aren't attackers that attack and try to launch a payload right away.
Sure.
This is where detection and response can really play a big role in lowering the risk, because a lot of times that lateral spread, the automated tools are getting better at it, but that lateral spread frequently can be things that are very benign in and of themselves, right? It's not that they're using a hacking tool to do that.
Absolutely.
And it can go unnoticed. Now, again, with Microsoft Defender XDR going into the SIM, the playbooks are almost there, but as that starts to really knock down most of that risk, the MDR team itself is going to continue to move forward in the risks that the technology isn't picking up on its own. So that's where I feel like these two work hand in hand.
Yeah, and they're going to do everything they can to stay undetected and cover their tracks, which is why being able to identify that strange behavior as it's happening is so important.
So as an example, we're a small business. We're also a managed service provider. So for us, we have a number of high value assets. And one of the most important is the access we have to our clients' networks and passwords and privileged access. So everything that we're talking about here and recommending, we've got implemented internally. Assume breach, least privilege, verify explicitly. I mean, those steps are in place. And then we have this 7x24 SOC service in place, monitoring our own systems with all the other tools that we already have in place as well. We just believe it's that important. And candidly, we haven't had an alert that I'm aware of at all from the NOC service so far this year, right?
That's right.
6 weeks in. It's hard to believe. Today is January 16th, 2021. And what the really notable point there is that this is the first day of the second half of Q1 2021. So when we think about our business plans and we think about what we're doing, right, we're halfway through the first quarter. 12.5% of 2021 is already behind us, right? And this kind of touches on something I think we've already touched. Our SOC partner really does bring a very high level of expertise, not just alerts, true response, true partnership, where we've got an incident response plan, the playbook between them, where they're authorized to take actions up to a certain level. Certainly always contacting us 7x24, so your known senior resources are involved in in any incident that occurs. Just available to us as well as a level of expertise to ask questions and kind of make sure that we're really, keeping things as secure as possible for our important clients. Anything else in that, Keith?
No, it's just like we've been saying, defense in depth. Alerts are great, but you also need eyes on those alerts, and you need to be taking action promptly.
So really, we touched on two investments that if you don't have them, we're asking you to think about in your overall technology strategy. Look at your priorities and take a look at moving into Microsoft XDR, and we had talked about the investment for that. And then depending on your risk tolerance or your concern there from a security perspective, the 7x24 SOC is an additional step that is recommended. I would make sure that the Microsoft XDR is fully deployed as kind of the base security layer. But again, we've invested in the 7x24 NOC services as well. We think in today's world, it's super important, and it goes back to my Nielsen quote that I love so much, which is the price of light is less than the cost of darkness. And I think of price as a proactive leadership decision to make an investment. And cost is really wrapped up in consequences to me. If for some reason we didn't or we couldn't, and we suffer those consequences, they're always going to be dramatically more expensive. And the next part of response that we didn't touch on in today's webinar is incident response itself, and having an incident response plan and an incident response team, and just having those parties understand, because if you had a full breach, if you had a data leak, if you got ransomware, at that point, it's not just technical responsiveness, which we bring, right? We have those abilities and processes in place. You also have potentially legal, law enforcement, PR, your executive team, your board, the ability to manage the communication potentially across those different, shareholders that are important in that. So incident response is another next step that can be touched on. Our goal here is to keep these below an hour for sure. We're really trying to move towards 30 minutes. We're kind of technical guys, so I know we put more in there than you probably needed, but I think we're getting better at it. I don't think an executive webinar needs to be an hour long, but I hope you found this helpful. Again, as always, our next steps are always to think about your IT priorities and take action. And for our customers, that rhythm is our quarterly strategy alignment meetings. And it's awesome when we get those done going into the year and we've got a good strategy. And then when we're resyncing quarterly, it can be a very quick touch to make sure, has anything changed? It also gives you that roadmap where if we're not going to do XDR now, we take that, we have a visual roadmap, we'll put that out in Q4 if that's when you're going to do it. We'll move it into next year if it has to happen. And all these different IT investments and elements are on that roadmap with budgets and priorities and decisions about whether they're on hold or when we're going to fund them. So it gives you a very clear map to follow. So I encourage you, if you haven't scheduled your quarterly strategy alignments, please do it now. We have that link that we send out that allows you to set them up in advance for the whole year. We'll follow up with all of our clients sending that out if you don't have them set. And then make sure you attend them. I mean, these are really important. Your feedback is critical for us to help you make the right investments to keep you secure and productive. And if we can help in any way, please reach out. Thank you for your time.